In the quiet hours of the morning, I often find myself drifting back to the days when Emily and I were just beginning our journey together. Those were simpler times, filled with laughter and modest dreams. Our love seemed unbreakable, a bond forged in the fires of mutual passion and understanding. We were young, perhaps naive, believing that love was enough to sustain us through any storm. Our small apartment was a universe unto itself, where each shared meal was a feast and every moment together a celebration. We didn't have much in terms of material wealth, but what we lacked in luxury, we made up for in companionship and joy. I remember how we used to dance in our living room, her head resting against my chest, moving to the rhythm of a song only we could hear. But as the years passed, I watched as a subtle discontent crept into Emily's eyes. It was as if the life we had, the life I was so grateful for, had become too small for her ambitions. She started to speak of finer things, grand houses, luxurious vacations, jewels that sparkled like stars in the night sky. I listened, always listening, trying to give her the world within my means. Yet it never seemed enough. The love that once shone so brightly between us was now flickering in the shadow of her growing aspirations. Her transformation was not sudden, but rather a slow drift into a world of glittering fantasies. She spent hours on the internet, browsing through websites that sold designer clothes and accessories, often sighing in resignation at our inability to afford them. I remember feeling a growing sense of inadequacy, a silent pressure building within me to provide more, to be more. One evening, as we sat across from each other at our dining table, the air heavy with unspoken words, she finally broke the silence. Michael, don't you ever dream of more? She asked, her voice laced with a mixture of hope and frustration. Don't you ever want to escape this ordinary life? I looked into her eyes, searching for the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who found joy in our simplest moments. Emily, I have everything I ever wanted right here with you, I replied, my voice a mere whisper, laden with emotion. Isn't that enough? But her gaze had shifted, no longer meeting mine, staring instead at a distant point, a place where my words could not reach. It was in that moment that I realized the distance between us had grown too vast, the divide too deep to bridge with words alone. The rest of the evening passed in silence, a silence that spoke louder than any argument we had ever had. It was the silence of dreams diverging, of a love struggling to find its place in the face of unfulfilled desires. As I lay in bed that night, with Emily's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that our world was slowly unraveling, thread by thread. The future, once so bright and certain, now lay obscured in the shadows of doubt and longing. Her conversations began to orbit around the lives of the affluent. She spoke of colleagues who vacationed in exotic locales or purchased homes in upscale neighborhoods. At first, I listened and nodded, trying to be the supportive husband. But as time went on, I could no longer ignore the undercurrent of dissatisfaction in her voice. Our modest outings, which once brought us so much joy, became less frequent. She started declining invitations to our favorite local diner, preferring instead to spend evenings browsing online for luxury items we couldn't afford. The sparkle in her eye when a glossy ad for a high-end brand caught her attention was a stark contrast to the indifference she showed towards our simple, shared activities. The gap between us widened with every passing day. I tried to bridge it with small surprises, a bouquet of her favorite flowers, a handwritten note expressing my love. But these gestures, which once would have lit up her face with happiness, now only earned a fleeting smile. I remember one evening, as we sat quietly in our living room, the air filled with the unspoken. Emily was flipping through a magazine, her eyes scanning over images of lavish lifestyles. I mustered the courage to broach the topic that had been weighing on me. Emily, do you remember how we used to dream of traveling the world together, discovering new places, no matter the luxury? I asked tentatively. She looked up, her gaze distant. Yes, but that was before, Michael. Before I realized we could aim for so much more. Her words stung, a sharp reminder of the chasm that had formed between us. But isn't happiness more about who we're with than where we're or what we have? I ventured, my voice laced with a mix of hope and fear. Emily's response was a shrug, a nonchalant gesture that spoke volumes. Perhaps, but we can't ignore the world around us, Michael. We can't pretend that more isn't better. That night, as I lay beside her, her back turned to me, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. The woman I loved was there in body, but her heart and mind seemed to be drifting further away, chasing after a life I could neither understand nor provide. The following days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew. Conversations became functional, revolving around necessities rather than dreams and desires. The warmth we once shared turned cool, and I found myself walking on eggshells, afraid to shatter the fragile peace that hung between us. I started to question everything: our love, our marriage, the very foundation of our relationship. Had I missed the signs? Was I to blame for not seeing the change in her sooner? The answers eluded me, lost in the maze of my troubled thoughts. As summer gave way to autumn, the realization that our life together might be changing irreversibly settled heavily on my heart. Emily's whispers of ambition, once just faint echoes, had become a loud chorus in our life, a tune I couldn't dance to, and I feared, more than anything, that these whispers might soon lead her to a path I couldn't follow. Emily had been distant, lost in thought for weeks, and I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that this was just a phase that would pass. But deep down, I knew something significant was amiss. The air between us was charged with an unspoken finality that I couldn't quite grasp. It happened on a Thursday evening. I returned home from work to find Emily sitting at the dining table, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The look on her face was one of determination laced with an undeniable sadness. My heart sank. I knew this was not just another conversation. "Michael, we need to talk," she began, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a hint of turmoil. I sat across from her, bracing myself for what was to come. "What is it, Emily?" She took a deep breath, and the words that followed fell like cold rain on my hopes. "I'm leaving, Michael. I've realized that I need more from life, more than you can give me." The room spun, and I struggled to find my voice. "Leaving, but why? Haven't we built a life together?" Her reply was a mixture of apology and resolve. "I have, Michael, but it's not the life I want anymore. I've met someone else, someone who can give me the things I desire." I felt a numbness spread through me, a dull ache that threatened to engulf my being. "And our vows, our years together, do they mean nothing?" She avoided my gaze, focusing on a spot somewhere behind me. "They meant everything, once. But I can't deny my heart. This is about my happiness, Michael." The finality in her voice left no room for doubt. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a choice made over countless days and nights of longing for a life beyond the confines of our simple existence. She spoke of him, this man who had promised her a world filled with luxury and excitement. A man who, in her words, understood her needs and was willing to fulfill them. As she described her plans to move in with him, each word was a nail in the coffin of our shared history. I sat there, a spectator in the dismantling of my own life, my questions unanswered, my pleas unheard. The woman I loved, the woman I had devoted my life to, was leaving me for a world I could not be part of. As the conversation drew to its inevitable close, Emily stood up, her movements deliberate and certain. "I'm leaving tonight," she announced, her voice void of the warmth I once knew. "I'll be staying with him. I'll come back for my things later." The finality of her words, the readiness in her actions, struck me with a force that was almost physical. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a well-orchestrated plan, executed with a precision that left no room for second thoughts. I watched, paralyzed, as she gathered a few essentials, moving around our shared space with an ease that belied the gravity of the moment. Her preparations were meticulous, each item chosen with the care of someone embarking on a long, awaited journey. The door closed behind her with a soft click, a sound that echoed through the now empty rooms. I was left alone, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had unraveled in the span of an evening. The night stretched on, each passing hour a reminder of the profound void her departure had left. I sat in the darkness, the silence around me punctuated by the memories of our life together. The plans we had made, the dreams we had shared, all seemed like distant echoes of a past that was slipping away. In those early hours of solitude, the reality of what had transpired began to sink in. Emily was gone, not just for the night, but possibly forever. She had chosen a different path, one lined with the promises and allure of a life I could not offer. And in doing so, she had turned our shared history into a chapter that was closing, leaving behind a narrative that I now had to rewrite alone. As the first light of dawn crept into the room, casting a soft glow on the empty spaces she had once filled, I knew that the coming days would bring the final act of our shared story. She would return for her belongings, and with each item she took, a piece of our life would be permanently erased. The pain of her betrayal, the shock of her preparedness, and the abruptness of her departure were overwhelming. But in the depths of that despair, I also found a glimmer of something else, a resilience I didn't know I had. It was the faintest whisper of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit could find the strength to endure. The days following Emily's departure were a blur of emotions. The quietness of our home, once a sanctuary of love and laughter, now echoed with the haunting silence of her absence. It was during this time of introspection that I learned more about the man Emily had left me for. He was a wealthy businessman, known in social circles for his extravagant lifestyle and grand parties. In the weeks that ensued, whispers of Emily's new life reached me through mutual friends and acquaintances. It was a life lived in the shadow of wealth, a stark contrast to the simplicity of our shared past. She was now residing in a luxurious mansion, a place where opulence was the norm and extravagance was commonplace. I found myself grappling with a mix of curiosity and masochism. Driving past their grand residence one evening, the house stood like a fortress, its imposing gates and manicured lawns a testament to the world Emily had chosen over ours. Lights glimmered through the windows, painting a picture of a life that was now beyond my reach. It was surreal, seeing her move in those affluent circles, attending galas and events that were splashed across social media and gossip columns. There, in those photos, was Emily, but not the Emily I knew. This version of her was adorned in designer dresses and jewels, her arm linked with her new partner, her smile seemingly untroubled by the past she had left behind. But as I observed this new chapter of her life unfold from a distance, I couldn't help but wonder about the authenticity of her happiness. Was she truly content in this new world, or was it merely a facade, a performance put on for the world to see? The Emily I knew had a light in her eyes when she was genuinely happy, a light that seemed absent in these polished images. I also heard stories, hushed conversations hinting that her relationship with the wealthy businessman was not as idyllic as it appeared. Rumors of his controlling nature and temperamental mood swings began to surface, painting a less than perfect picture of Emily's new life. Amidst this turmoil of news and rumors, I found myself at a crossroads. Part of me yearned for Emily's happiness, even if it meant her happiness without me. Yet, another part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction in knowing that the grass might not be as green as she had imagined on the other side. But as time passed, my initial feelings of resentment and schadenfreude gave way to a deeper, more introspective state. I began to realize that Emily's journey was her own, just as mine was mine. The choices she made, whether for better or worse, were a part of her path, not mine. This realization brought with it a certain sense of release. I slowly started to disentangle myself from the narrative of Emily's new life and refocused on my own journey. In doing so, I began to acknowledge the void she had left, not just in my heart, but in my very existence. The process of healing was slow and often painful. I spent many nights wrestling with memories, trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had uprooted my life. But in those moments of solitude and reflection, I also discovered a resilience within me. I started to embrace the quiet, to find solace in the simplicity that had once defined our life together. As autumn turned to winter, the cold winds brought a sense of clarity. Emily's departure had left a scar, but it was a scar that was slowly beginning to heal. I realized that while her leap into gold had taken her into the arms of wealth, it had also given me the opportunity to rediscover myself, to find strength in solitude, and to seek a new beginning that was wholly my own. Winter brought not only the cold but also news and whispers about Emily's new life. The luxurious world she had entered was as distant to me as a foreign land. Yet the echoes of her life there reached me through mutual acquaintances and overheard conversations. The man she was with, a figure known for his wealth and influence, was as much a subject of public interest as he was of private speculation. Rumors swirled about his lavish parties, his extravagant gifts, and the high-profile circles he moved in. Emily, by his side, seemed to have stepped into a role that was worlds apart from the life we had shared. I heard of their travels to exotic locations, glimpses of which were splashed across social media. There she was, always beside him, smiling in photos set against backdrops of luxury and opulence. Yet, in those images, I saw a different Emily, one who seemed to be playing a part in a story that I could no longer read. Conversations with acquaintances often turned towards them, and while I tried to steer away, a part of me was drawn to these updates, a masochistic need to know how her life was unfolding. They spoke of the grandeur of their living, the parties that were the talk of the town, the kind of life that Emily had always dreamed of. But not all was as perfect as it seemed. Hushed voices spoke of the businessman's controlling nature, of how he dictated not just Emily's lifestyle, but also her appearance and social interactions. There were murmurs about his temper, about moments when the facade of the perfect couple crumbled in the face of his demands and outbursts. As I processed this information, my feelings were a complex tapestry of concern, curiosity, and a reluctant acknowledgement of the choices she had made. Despite the hurt she had caused, I couldn't help but worry about her well-being. The Emily I knew, the one who valued freedom and expression, might have found herself in a gilded cage. The disparity between our lives had never been more pronounced. While she navigated a world of wealth and expectations, I was left to piece together my existence in the quiet of our once shared home. The contrast between her apparent ascent to a life of glamour and my descent into solitude was stark. Yet, amidst these reflections, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease, a sense that the image presented to the world was a carefully curated illusion. The glittering lifestyle that had lured Emily away seemed to have its own shadows, ones that were perhaps darker than either of us had anticipated. As winter's grip loosened and the first signs of spring appeared, I found myself at a crossroads of emotion. There was a part of me that still cared for Emily, that hoped she was truly happy in her choices. But there was also a part of me that felt a deep sense of loss, not just for the relationship we had, but for the person she had once been. The echoes of her new life, with its complex layers of luxury and potential strife, continued to reach me, a distant reminder of a path we had once walked together but had now diverged. And as I looked ahead to the coming of spring, I realized that my journey was now my own, a path I had to navigate with the memories of a love that was no more. The arrival of spring brought with it a change that no one could have anticipated. The news came to me through a mutual friend, a piece of gossip that would have seemed implausible just months before. Emily's world, the one she had left me for, had been suddenly and irrevocably altered. The wealthy businessman, the man who had promised her a life of luxury and grandeur, had passed away unexpectedly. The details were murky, a mix of whispered rumors and speculation, but the reality was clear. Emily's new life had come to an abrupt end. In the days that followed, more information trickled in. The most shocking revelation was regarding the businessman's will. Contrary to what many had assumed, he had left nothing to Emily. His vast fortune was to be divided among his grown children from a previous marriage, with no mention of Emily or any provision for her. This turn of events was the talk of our social circles, a dramatic twist in a story that had already captured the attention of many. For me, it was a moment of conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was a sense of vindication, a feeling that the universe had somehow righted itself. But on the other hand, there was concern and even pity for Emily. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel for her in her time of loss and uncertainty. The life she had chosen, the dreams she had pursued, had vanished like smoke. The security and opulence she had sought had proven to be as ephemeral as the changing seasons. I wondered how she was coping, how she was managing the stark reality of her situation. As the news sank in, I found myself reflecting on the unpredictable nature of life. Emily had left in pursuit of a certain kind of life, a life that seemed secure and desirable. But now, that security had been pulled from under her feet, leaving her in a precarious position. I also thought about the nature of wealth and happiness. Emily had stepped into a world where wealth was abundant, but in the end, it had offered her no protection, no lasting fulfillment. It was a sobering reminder that the things we chase, the dreams we aspire to, can sometimes lead us down paths we never expected. In a way, this news marked the end of a chapter for Emily. It was the collapse of the life she had built with her new partner. For me, it was the final severing of the ties that had bound me to her and her choices. As spring blossomed around me, bringing new life and new beginnings, I realized that this event, though tragic, was also a catalyst for closure. Emily's journey had taken a turn I never wished for her, but it also freed me from the lingering threads of our past. The fall of fortunes was a stark reminder of the impermanence of life and the unpredictability of fate. It was a lesson in letting go, in accepting the ebb and flow of life's tides. And as I looked forward to the future, I did so with a newfound understanding of the transient nature of happiness and the importance of finding peace within oneself. The news of the businessman's passing and the subsequent revelations about his will rippled through our community, but for me, it brought a contemplative silence. Emily, once so sure of her new path, now found herself adrift. The future she had envisioned crumbled to dust. In the weeks following the businessman's death, Emily's presence in the social scene diminished. The grand parties and luxurious outings that had defined her new life ceased, and in their place, there was a void, filled only by speculation and whispers. I heard through shared acquaintances that she had moved out of the mansion, the symbol of her new life, now a place of loss and unfulfilled promises. Where she went was a mystery to many, shrouded in the privacy she sought to maintain in the wake of her sudden change in fortune. Despite the pain of our past, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy for her. Emily had chased a dream, only to have it snatched away in the most unexpected manner. The irony of her situation was not lost on me. She had left in search of security and happiness, only to find herself facing uncertainty and, perhaps, loneliness. I found myself reflecting on the concept of loss. Emily had lost her new partner, the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to, and the future she had imagined. But it wasn't just material loss, it was a loss of identity, of the role she had assumed in her new world. As for me, the news brought a complex mix of emotions. There was a part of me that still cared for her, that wished her no harm. But there was also a sense of closure, a feeling that the chapter of our lives that had remained open, lingering in the background, was now finally closed. The legacy of loss was a powerful one. It had touched both our lives in different ways, teaching harsh lessons about the nature of happiness and the pursuit of dreams. For Emily, it was a stark reminder of the unpredictability of life and the fragility of the worlds we build. For me, it was a confirmation that moving on was not just necessary, but vital. In those days, I found a deeper understanding of the saying that sometimes you have to lose something to find yourself. Emily's loss, though different from mine, was a turning point for both of us. It was a painful end to a journey, but also the beginning of a new understanding. The legacy of loss thus became a legacy of learning and growth. For Emily, it was an opportunity to reassess her choices and priorities. For me, it was a chance to embrace my journey of healing and self-discovery. As the season turned and the first hints of summer appeared on the horizon, I found myself looking forward with a sense of hope and renewal. The past, with all its pain and lessons, was behind me, and ahead lay a path that was mine to forge, free from the shadows of a relationship that had once defined my existence. Remember, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't hesitate to share it with your friends, family, and fellow adventurers in the YouTubeverse. As always, your comments and